Welcome back to Movie Recaps. Today I will show you a drama, mystery,
Felix,
thriller
you
film from
got me so
2009,
bricked up.
titled
Can
The
I
Box.
have a welcome back to
Spoil-
the jungle 7 septillion 7?
I want to try this one.
X the virus movie recap is really good. It's about one of the best virus outbreak movies, Contagion.
I'll watch both of them.
Welcome back to Movie Recaps. Today I will show you a drama, mystery, thriller film from 2009, titled The Box. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. In July 1976, the NSA deputy director receives an incredibly important memorandum from NASA's Mars project, confirming they were able to resuscitate patient Arlington Stewart, who's been released from the burn unit and taken to an undisclosed location. Since then, the patient has constructed a device of unknown purpose and has been delivering it to private residences. 5 months later, in Virginia, Arthur and Norma Lewis are woken up at almost 6 a.m. by the doorbell. By the time Norma makes it to the door, she gets to see a black car leaving and finds a plain box at their porch. They decide to open it while having breakfast with their son Walter, and inside they find a wooden box with a button on it that can only be accessed through a key. There's also an envelope with a note that says Mr. Stewart will call them at 5 p.m., but they don't know anyone with that name. The family leaves for the day then. Walter goes to school, and Norma goes to her teaching job, where her student Charles asks her why she limps and to show them her foot.
xQcL
Seeing as she is being called out in front of the class, Norma takes off her boot and sock and shows everyone how deformed her foot is. Afterward, she's summoned by the school principal, who tells her they will no longer provide the faculty discount for her son's tuition as his nose starts bleeding. This news greatly distresses her, because her family is already living paycheck to paycheck. Arthur, meanwhile, goes to his job at NASA. After watching a press conference about what the spacecraft Viking 1 found on Mars, for which he designed the camera, he goes to the labs, where he continues to work on a prosthesis for Norma's foot. He's suddenly interrupted by one of his bosses, Norm Cahill, who brings him a letter with the results of his astronaut application. He's been rejected because he hasn't passed the psychological exam. Everyone thinks this is rather strange. When Norma returns home, she receives a visit from a man with the side of his face burned. It's Mr. Stewart, who is here to explain the purpose of the box. He hands her the key that opens the lid that covers the button and says that if Norma presses it, two things will happen: someone in the world they don't know will die, and she will get $1 million, tax-free in cash. As proof of his intentions, he gifts her a $100 bill before detailing the rules. He isn't allowed to disclose any information about the identity of his employers. Norma isn't allowed to discuss the details of this with anyone except Arthur, and she has 24 hours to make her decision. At 5 p.m. the next day, Stewart will come to pick up the box, which will be reprogrammed and taken to a new family. Before Norma can ask any more questions though, Stewart just gets in his car and leaves. Some hours later, Arthur returns home, and after the couple shares their bad news with each other, Norma tells him about Stewart and the box. Unable to agree on what to do, they leave the box in their safe before leaving for the theater while Walter stays with his babysitter, Dana. But even at the theater, they can't stop thinking and discussing the box, unaware someone is watching them. So when they return home, they grab the box and inspect it more closely, until Arthur manages to open its base and discovers it's empty inside, which makes them wonder how could someone know if the button gets pressed at all. If they don't decide quickly and solve their financial problems, Norma will have to cancel her foot surgery. The next day, one of Arthur's co-workers, Jeffrey Carnes, receives a call from his wife to tell him she saw a woman being kidnapped while she was in the grocery store. Jeffrey tells her to go home and lock all the doors, unaware he is being watched from afar by the same person that has been following Arthur and Norma.
What?
After work, Arthur takes the $100 bill back to Norma and informs her the tests he's run confirm the bill is real, so after some discussion, Norma goes ahead and pushes the button. In another part of the city, the cops arrive at a house after the neighbor called 911 to report some screaming and a gunshot. They find a dead woman and a little girl locked in the bathroom.
Now do it again.
Moments later, Stewart visits the Lewis and gives them a suitcase with $1 million before leaving with the box, which he'll take to a new person they don't know. Arthur follows him to the car and tries to give him the suitcase back, but Stewart ignores him and drives away. The couple gets to see his license plate though, and they write it down. At the police station, Norma's father, Dick Burns, is working on the dead woman's case. They find out she's Jeffrey's wife, but Jeffrey himself is nowhere to be found, although some witnesses saw him run out of the house after the gun was shot. Later that night, Arthur gives Norma the prosthesis he's made, which fits her perfectly and allows her to walk without pain or limping. Afterward, they go to the rehearsal dinner of Norma's sister's wedding, where Charles is working as a waiter. Norma's parents are raffling the donated gifts for the holiday season, and the first winner is Arthur, who chooses the plain brown.
Because I feel like this actor,
The rehearsal dinner of Norma's sister's wedding, where Charles is.
this guy He plays the crazy guy in like 10 movies. I think it's time to give him another role, man.
working as a waiter.
I think it's time to
Norma's
widen the
parents are
scope of
raffling the
the
donated
acting,
gifts
man.
for the holiday season, and the first winner is Arthur, who chooses the plain brown box, which looks like the one Stuart left them, after Charles flashes him the peace sign. He takes it with him to the table and opens it with Norma, finding inside a picture of Stuart from when he still had his whole face. Moments later, while having a drink with Charles, Arthur gives him Stuart's license plate number so he can use his police resources to find out who this man really is. He also cannot help noticing how Charles keeps on watching him, so he asks another guest about him, getting upset when he hears this kid embarrassed his wife in front of the class. Meanwhile, a waiter with a bleeding nose tells Norma she has a phone call. It's Stuart, who tells her there will be consequences for having asked the police about his car. After hanging up, Norma rushes out of the room when she hears some noises outside. It's Arthur, who is aggressively confronting Charles for what he said to his wife. Not wanting to make a scene, she pulls him away and asks him to go home, but when they get in the car, they find the words "no exit" written on their window and Charles flashing the peace sign at them again. Back in the house, Dana is doing her best to entertain Walter while ignoring the shadows outside the window, and they both fall asleep by the time his parents come back. Arthur offers to drive her to her place, and she tells him she's staying in a motel before she starts making cryptic comments that suggest she may know what he's going through. When Arthur asks her for advice, she responds to look into the light, then passes out with a bleeding nose. Trying to find some information to help her, Arthur looks inside her bag and finds an ID that says her name is actually Sarah Matthews, which he puts away in his pocket as Dana wakes up and starts freaking out, telling him he needs to leave because it's not safe for him there. When she enters the motel, every guest comes out to stare at her as she makes her way to her room, where she keeps a big board with a map and pictures of the Lewis family. The guests then go to the motel pool to stare at the water. Arthur returns to Norma and tells her Dana has lied about her name and the place she's from, and Norma explains this is what Stuart probably meant when he said he has employees that can tell him what they do. While looking at Stuart's picture, Arthur realizes he's seen him before and rushes to look at a poster of the first Viking trip to Mars. Stuart is there as one of the workers of the mission. The next day, Stuart calls Norma to warn her about possible consequences again. Norma asks him to meet in person, and when Stuart tells him he's in his backyard, Norma notices a random man outside, staring at her with his mouth open. Stuart hangs up on her at his hidden office behind NASA's wind tunnels. One of the NSA employees goes to see the NASA bosses to demand even more things, this time asking for the hangar and the lunar lander for activities he isn't allowed to explain but that will involve NASA employees. Kyle isn't happy with this, but he has no choice but to accept. Arthur visits Dick at the police station to see if he has any news about the license plate, which turns out belongs to an NSA car. When Arthur sees the pictures of Jeffrey's wife and he or she died at the same time they press the button, he asks it to take him to the crime scene. At Jeffrey's house, Arthur finds a picture of Stuart and something called Human Resource Exploitation Manual with some numbers under it, so he steals the picture for himself while Dick isn't looking. Meanwhile, Norma is shopping with his mother when a woman approaches her and tells her the NSA is letting him do it, that NASA can't stop him, and that the subjects are all under 40, happily married with a child. The woman also gives her a note with a number that Norma should follow when going to the Richmond Library and tells her not to trust anyone, not even her husband, before passing out with a bleeding nose. Both Norma and Arthur go to the library to see where the numbers they got take them. Norma finds a recording of the NASA hangar and the damage caused by the lightning that struck months ago. There's also a clip of a NASA press conference Stuart attended before the tragedy. After watching the whole video, Norma is guided by two women to where Stuart is waiting for her for a chat. He tells her that since he got struck by lightning, he's been in communication with those that control it. He also wants to know what Norma felt the first time she saw his face, because he thinks it probably was pity. Norma's answer, however, is love, because she knew how much pain disfigurement could cause in someone's life, but at least she could keep her hidden, while he had to carry his on his exposed face. After seeing him, Norma would never feel sorry for herself again. Surprised by her words, Stuart asks her to take his hand, and when she does, she falls unconscious. Arthur finds a book about lightning and a newspaper article about the time a NASA employee got struck by lightning, and as he leaves the room with it, he starts being followed by a group of library guests. He tries to leave through the reading room, but the people there also stand up to look at him, and his way is blocked by Stuart's wife, Clemeny, who tells him the library is for employees only and that they are all being tested. Then she takes him to another room where 3 gateways await on the floor. Arthur must choose carefully because only one is the path to salvation and the other 2 take you to eternal damnation. Clemeny extends her hand and starts bleeding as she activates the gateways, which become 3 columns of water, and Arthur doesn't hesitate to choose number 2 as he remembers what Charles signed to him during the party. As soon as he touches the gateway, Arthur is absorbed by white light and, moments later, he and the water show up in his room, floating above a sleeping Norma, who wakes up right before her husband and the water fall on the bed with her. Walter comes to check on them, and while cleaning, he tells Norma that last night she arrived home while looking like a zombie and didn't say anything.
Her foot
Just
is
went
fixed
straight to
then.
bed. Meanwhile, Kyle secretly meets with the NSA employee, who tells him Stewart got hit by lightning 5 months ago and the reason why NASA never heard of him again is that he's something else now. He died after the accident, but several hours after he was taken to the morgue and locked in a freezer, a nurse heard him laugh, so he was transferred to a high-security military hospital. Since then, he has been demonstrating some extraordinary capabilities, like healing faster and halted cellular deterioration. Unknown to them, Stewart hears the whole conversation. Later, when asked by the NSA employee why he chose a box, he explains that homes, cars, and TVs are boxes, and they all erode the soul and the body, which is also a box that when it dies, is put in yet another box. Stewart's test can be passed by not pressing the button, and these tests will be what will help his employers decide the fate of humanity. Nearby, all employees like Dana are being guided into a white light to prepare for another test in Massachusetts later at night. The Lewis family goes to Norma's sister's weddings, and while dancing, Arthur describes the light to Norma as a warm embrace, not here or there, but something in between, with no despair in the human heart. As always, they're being followed by Stewart's men, but when Arthur starts feeling sick and goes outside, it isn't an employee that gets in his way, it's Jeffrey. Threatening him with a gun, Jeffrey tells him it's too late for him but Arthur can still save himself and gets him in the truck with him. Walter and Norma, noticing he's missing, try to go after him, but a group of men arrive and kidnap them both. In the truck, Jeffrey shows Arthur some classified documents that said people with frontal lobe hemorrhage cannot be treated as employees. This is Stewart's weakness, he hasn't found a way to get into people's minds without them noticing. He has all important agencies like the FBI
Guys,
under his
what the
control,
fuck is
but
happening
he can
here?
be killed. They've taken Arthur's son to the motel the same way they took Jeffrey's daughter, and he's being lowered into the pool, which is another gateway. Jeffrey had to kill his own wife for the sake of his daughter, who went through the same thing and Stewart made him choose between them. The truck comes to a stop when they find a man dressed as Santa Claus blocking the road, and they're suddenly hit by another vehicle, revealing Santa to be one of the employees. When the police arrive, however, they only find Jeffrey's body inside the truck. Arthur suddenly finds himself leaving a NASA hangar, and waiting there for him is Cahill, who tells him whatever he does next will have greater ramifications than he can possibly imagine. Arthur and Norma are taken back to their home, where Stewart is waiting for them with a final test. He's locked Walter in the bathroom after he's been stricken blind and deaf, and now his parents must choose between two options: living the rest of their lives enjoying their money and dealing with a disabled son, or Arthur can kill Norma, which will give Walter his senses back and the money will be put into an account he can access when he turns 18. Furious, Arthur grabs the gun Stewart has given them for the test and points it at his head, but Stewart explains it's pointless. Killing him will only put Arthur in prison under a story nobody will buy and someone else will be sent to replace him. After Stewart leaves, the couple rushes to the bathroom.
Technically he broke into his house, so...
But it's locked and they don't dare to kick the door down because Walter is on the other side, unable to hear them and move away. Norma decides that she can't see Walter like this, so she asks Arthur to shoot her. After kissing passionately, Arthur pulls the trigger, and Norma dies at the same time another couple in the neighborhood pushes the button on the box. Arthur returns to the bathroom door to talk to his son, but he only gets to hear him call out for him before the cops arrive and take him away. Instead of being sent away in a police car, however, he's put inside the NSA's black car, and Cahill tells Arthur not to worry because he'll take good care of Walter, who is now looking at him through the window with his recovered senses. Meanwhile, Stewart retrieves the box from the other family's house, ready to hand it out to someone new. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos.
The only thing that I always find weird is, like whenever you're a writer, you have to go to a company, right? And you have to show them the plot and the script, or not the script, the idea for the movie you want to produce, right? Imagine you come into an office with somebody and you present them this fucking idea. What the fuck, dude? I just watched and I don't know what the fuck is happening. I don't know what just happened. That was... What do you mean there's anything? This was so far out and twisted. What the fuck was that?
Welcome to Movie Caps.
Okay,
Today I will
gotta
show
get the
you a
food
drama,
chat.
thriller film from 2011, titled Contagion. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. Day 2. Beth is at an airport lounge talking on the phone with John, whom she's having an affair with, while waiting for her flight. She looks sick and is coughing, but brushes it off as her being jet-lagged. In Hong Kong, a young man gets off a ferry and takes the subway. By the time he gets home, he is sweating profusely. When he leaves his apartment, his vision gets blurry, and he walks into traffic. In London, a model is feeling sick, so she leaves work and goes back to her hotel room. Later, the hotel staff come into the room and find her dead on the bathroom floor. A businessman flies to Tokyo and takes the bus, but collapses on the floor. An onlooker films him with his phone. Beth arrives home to her son and her husband Mitch. Day 3. In San Francisco, a blogger, Alan, is watching the video of the businessman collapsing. He's guessing it might be mercury poisoning from the fish and that there are probably more people like him, that just weren't caught on camera. Mitch picks his son up from school and is informed that he's been coughing and has elevated body temperature. Later, as he is telling his wife about his day, she drops her cup, and when he comes to help, she collapses on the floor and starts seizing. They are in the hospital and she starts seizing again. A bit later, the doctor informs Mitch that she has passed away. He is in shock and can't accept it, saying they just talked and she was just jet-lagged. The doctor doesn't know what caused it, so he recommends an autopsy. As Mitch is driving home, he gets a call from the babysitter that informs him that his son isn't breathing. He tells her to call 911 and rushes home to find him dead as well. Day 5. 2 medical examiners are doing an autopsy on Beth's body. As they open her skull, they notice something strange on her brain. One of them asks whether he should take a sample, but the other instructs him to move away from the table and call everyone. Day 6. Dr. Erin Mears works for the CDC. She is briefed by Dr. Cheever on her part of containing the virus. She is tasked to travel to Minnesota, where she is to investigate and contain cases of infection. Mitch is in quarantine at a hospital. He is visited by his daughter Jory from a previous marriage. He says that he isn't sick and is only there as a precaution. She says that she should have been there and could have helped, but he says she would have gotten sick too. He tells her to go back to her mother, but seeing as she's all he got left, she decides to stay with him. Dr. Erin is briefing government officials on the mysterious outbreak that has reached 47 confirmed cases and 8 deaths. She informs them that it's most likely transmitted through air and maybe surfaces as well. The officials don't want to freak out the public, because they don't even know what they're dealing with. Erin says that to determine the potential scale of the epidemic, it's crucial to figure out the average number of people one person can infect. 2 scientists, Ali and David, are working with the brain sample from Beth in a secure lab. They don't know what this virus is, so they send the results to a scientist that might. Later, as Ian is walking out of his lab, informing the 2 scientists that the virus strain has never been seen before and appears to come from animals, he is ambushed by Alan, who tries to get some information for his blog, while rambling that the virus is a biological weapon, but the scientist doesn't tell him anything. Day 7. Dr. Erin is at Beth's workplace talking to her coworkers. None of them directly interacted with Beth after she came back from China, so Erin reassures them. They mention that another coworker took her home from the airport, so she immediately calls him.
Yeah, it's a bad movie.
He is on the bus and she instructs him to get off because he is highly contagious. He waits at the stop until Beth arrives with a containment crew. Meanwhile, a doctor asks Mitch a bunch of questions about Beth, trying to figure out the virus origin, and other people she may have interacted with. The doctor mentions that she landed in Chicago before flying to Minnesota 5 hours later, and asks him if she left the airport or had any meetings there. He asks whether someone is sick in Chicago and that before they got married she had a relationship with John Neal, who lives there. Realization hits Mitch and he asks if John is infected. The doctor doesn't answer, saying that she can't give out that information. Ali informs Cheever that the virus contains pig and bat sequences and shows him how the virus attaches to humans. She also says that the virus keeps mutating. The virus mortality rate is over 20%, and there are no treatment protocols or vaccines, so Dr. Cheever orders that from now on only highest security labs should work on it, in fear of it leaking out. Ali calls Ian and tells him he isn't allowed to work on the virus because his lab doesn't have the right security certification. He thinks this is a mistake, because he is making progress and thinks that only working on it in government-run labs will slow the research. Day 8. Dr. Cheever informs the public that the virus is in Minneapolis, Chicago, Los Angeles, Boston and Salt Lake, and that the list is expected to grow. The number of infected people worldwide is estimated to be at 89,000. Cheever and Ali are at the CDC, discussing the virus with scientists from all over the world. Nobody has managed to grow the virus in cells, because it kills every animal cell they have tried.
Let's cook.
Dr. Leonora has been sent to Hong Kong to investigate Beth's movements to find ground zero. She is met by Sun Feng. Using Beth's credit card records, she learns that she was at a casino, so Leonora orders the casino's security tapes. Ian defies orders and keeps working on the virus. He manages to grow the virus using a particular bat's cells, which is the first step in making a vaccine. He shares the research and Cheever is not happy that he defied orders and asks what he wants to gain from it, but instead of selling the results to some drug company, he just wants acknowledgement for his work. Day 12. The worldwide infected estimate has reached 8 million. Alan is approached by a hedge fund guy, who is looking for an opportunity to gain money from this and thinks Alan might give him one, seeing that he was the first to pay attention to the bus video and has been talking about it on his blog since, reaching over 2 million unique visitors. Alan tells him about forsythia. He thinks it's the cure. Leonora is watching the casino footage where the first known infected can be seen interacting, but the Chinese officials say that this isn't proof that the virus originated here, stating that you can't see a virus on camera. Aaron is planning to make a makeshift hospital at multiple stadiums in preparation for an increase in infected. Day 14. Aaron wakes up in the hotel room coughing. She takes her temperature and realizes she has the virus, so she informs the hotel staff to get her the names of everyone who has serviced the room. She calls Cheever and tells him the bad news and later ends up in one of the stadiums. Cheever tries to get her to a better facility but is told that it's a waste of resources for just one person. In China, Leonora has finished her research and concluded that Beth is patient 0 and will send the data to Geneva. Sun Feng says he read on the internet that the United States and France have a vaccine but are hiding it from China. As she leaves, he makes a phone call. While driving, the car is stopped and Leonora is put in a van. Sun Feng takes her to his village and plans on using her as collateral to get the vaccine as early as possible. Cheever is informed that there are plans to quarantine
Somebody
Chicago.
pre-watched IRL.
The National Guard is setting up roadblocks and shutting down the border. The Secret Service is moving the president underground and Congress is figuring out how to work online. He is also told that when word of this gets out, there will be widespread panic, so it's crucial to not tell anyone until they are ready to announce it publicly. Alan has caught the virus and is making a video for his blog of him taking forsythia, saying that if he's alive tomorrow everyone will know it works. Later that day, Cheever calls his wife and instructs her to leave Chicago and not tell anyone. She picks up a ton of supplies and when a friend inquires about the situation, she
Why
spills
would you
the
get
beans.
2 flashlights? Just get 2
Day
batteries.
18. Apparently Alan's blog is gaining traction and he's still alive, so a bunch of people are waiting in line at a pharmacy and once they are informed that only 50 doses of forsythia will be given out, a panic ensues and they all scramble. Mitch and his daughter go to the store for some food, but the city is in disarray, with people looting and sick people walking around without masks and coughing, so they get out of there. They try to get to a neighboring state and learn that the border is closed because they are in quarantine. Erin is still at one of the stadiums. When a man next to her complains about being cold, Erin tries to give him her jacket, but is too weak to do so. She dies not long after.
Oh no.
Cheever is having a TV interview where alternative unproven drugs are being talked about. He informs that they are being evaluated, but besides that, the best people can do is wash their hands and social distance. When Alan comes on, he is quoted saying that the truth about the virus is being kept from the world by the CDC and WHO to allow friends of the current administration to benefit financially and physically. Alan insists that the WHO is in bed with pharmaceutical companies, but Cheever denies these claims and reasons that there is no science to back up forsythia. Alan discredits him, because apparently his wife's friend posted about the quarantine on Facebook, hours before the official announcement. Later Cheever is told that he can't yet be replaced, but there will be an investigation and he is to keep out of the public eye for now. Day 21. David and Allie find out that the virus has mutated and the new strain is way more contagious. They've been testing potential vaccines on monkeys but none have survived thus far. The mortality rate is between 25 and 30%, depending on a person's health, diet and socioeconomic status. It is expected that with this new strain each person will infect 4 more, whereas previously it was 2, and without a vaccine it is anticipated that approximately 8% of the world population will contract the
When did
disease.
they pull out the fucking horse
Day
paste?
26. The death toll in the United States has reached 2.5 million. The president has issued a statement implementing
need Joe
mandatory
Rogan.
curfew in major metropolitan areas, due to the riots. The military is distributing rations but runs out while hundreds are still waiting in line and people start fighting. Later Mitch hears shots in the neighboring house and tries to call 911 but all lines are busy. Day 29. Mitch breaks into the neighbor's empty house and steals a gun. Jory is in the backyard with her boyfriend, making snow angels. He gets on top of her and takes off his mask. She turns away but he reasons that if none of them have the virus they can't give it to each other. They are about to kiss but Mitch shows up and pulls him off of her and orders for him to go home. Back at the CDC, Allie's vaccine
Saved.
finally works and she injects herself. She goes to see her father at a hospital, takes off her mask and tells him about the news. He is concerned and says he doesn't want to get her sick, but she says she's testing the vaccine. The vaccine starts being manufactured and FDA is accelerating the approval. The first doses available for humans are expected in around 90 days, but it could take a year to get everyone vaccinated. The current death toll worldwide from the virus is estimated to be 26 million.
That's not that bad.
Day 131. Cheever's house is broken into by robbers, who are looking for the vaccine. The robbers ask his wife where it is, thinking that they would get it first because he works for the government, but they don't. Cheever gets home and asks if they hurt her. Alan, who is still against the vaccine,
there's 7
is
billion
talking
people on
to the
Earth,
hedge
no?
fund guy. He says that the studies show that there is no proof that forsythia works and asks if he knew about them when they first met. Alan questions the integrity of the studies, implying that there is some conspiracy. He then notices a suspicious man and realizes that he's wearing a wire, so he tries to run but is apprehended by the authorities, who arrest him for securities fraud, conspiracy and possible manslaughter. He insists that forsythia cured him. Day 133. Since there is not enough vaccines for everyone yet, a lottery is held using birthdays to distribute it fairly. Back in China, Leonora has adjusted to her captivity and is teaching the children. Sun Feng informs her that it's time to go, because the government has agreed to their demands and will give them 100 doses of the vaccine in exchange for her. They make the exchange and Leonora is free.
Nah.
She's at the airport.
Not to have it all wrong. It's they predicted everything, but if you fast forward to the future, dude. Nah, they have it backwards.
To do the exchange, and he gives her a vaccine and reveals that the ones they exchanged for her were placebos. Apparently, there have been many kidnappings of scientists and government officials
For us, it's
trying to
opposite.
extort vaccines,
We had
so
the vaccine,
government
people didn't want
refuses
it.
to give in to their demands. Leonora is horrified that they would condemn a village of mostly children to death and runs off. Alan's blood results showed no antibodies for the virus, which means he faked being sick, to push forsythia on his followers, which made him $4.5 million. Because of him, there are now millions of people who don't trust the vaccine. One of his followers made bail for him, so he walks out. Day 135. Alan is back on the street resuming his blog, pushing the narrative that the US is responsible for the virus and that vaccines are a scam to his 12 million internet followers. Otherwise, things are starting to go back to normal with anarchy and looting subsiding. Ali and David put the virus in liquid nitrogen storage with other deadly viruses from the past. Mitch finally lets Jory see her boyfriend since he is now vaccinated and gifts her a dress for a makeshift prom he has organized. He gets the camera to take some pictures but breaks down crying after seeing Beth's pictures. A final flashback occurs. A bat is seen dropping a piece of fruit in a pig farm. One of the pigs eats it and gets infected. A chef is preparing the pig but is told that someone wants to take a picture with him. He goes out without washing his hands and takes a picture with Beth. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this.
What? I don't get it. Wait a minute.
What?
Guys, I think it's gonna cringe when people say, "Oh, dude, they predicted this and that." It's like, yeah, there's a lot of coincidences or whatever, but the fact that they get there's a good amount that's correct, no? Unless it was a known, maybe it's because there's probably already problems with bats, right? Right? There's probably already a bunch of problems with bats, and it's like the most I guess prominent thing that happened or whatever. It's like a common denominator. So things saying that it's bats and real life staying from bats is like kind of easy to predict type of thing.
Today, I will show you a psychological thriller from 2010 titled Shutter Island. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. Two federal marshals, Teddy Daniels and Chuck Alley, are sent to Ashcliff Hospital, located on Shutter Island on Boston Harbor, to investigate the disappearance of a patient, Rachel Solano.
You're right, we've all seen these movies before. Let's look at this
recaps. Today I will show you a 2019 comedy film, titled Son of a Rich. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care.
Go watch it then.
During their first interaction, Chuck asks about Teddy's family, and learns that his wife, Dolores Chanel, was killed during a fire at their apartment. Upon arriving there, Deputy McPherson receives them, and tells them about different wards including Ward C, which houses the most dangerous and insane criminals. He also briefs them that the ward is off limits for anyone, without prior permission from the head doctor John Colley. In the doctor's office, Teddy questions him about Rachel Solando. John tells him that she was brought in, after she drowned her 3 children in the lake, while her husband was serving in Normandy. During the conversation, Teddy, who was already seasick, starts experiencing headaches, but John offers him medicine for his comfort. The marshals are later taken to Rachel's room, but they can't find anything noticeable, except a note that reads the Law of 4, who is 67. John recognizes her handwriting, but has no idea about what she tried to explain. Teddy then requests him to allow him to have a look at the staff records. John declines his request, but reluctantly agrees to call a meeting in the common room after dinner. While searching the island, Teddy spots some caves and a lighthouse, but McPherson tells there are no chances of Rachel being there, as it's impossible to reach the caves, while the lighthouse only serves as the sewage treatment facility. Their meeting with the staff also does not prove to be a big help, as they only find out about Dr. Sheehan, Rachel's primary doctor. Teddy requests a meeting with him, but is told that he has already left for a vacation. At night, when it starts to rain, Kali takes them to his mansion, and introduces them to his colleague Dr. Jeremiah Naring. While talking to them, Naring reveals they were involved in some sort of violent activities, and Teddy remembers shooting an officer during his service, after he was found involved in mass killings of innocent people, at the concentration camps. Teddy once again requests access to staff files, but argues with them as they refuse to comply, and decides to put an end to the investigation. After coming back from the mansion, he keeps thinking about Rachel's escape, but cannot figure out how she did it without any help. He also tells Chuck that he has no plan to go back, and was just bluffing, to force Kali to cooperate with them. Later, while asleep, he has disturbing dreams about Dolores, who tells him that Rachel is still there, because she never actually left, and mentions another guy, Andrew Laddis, asking Teddy to find him as well. The next morning, he questions Dr. John about Rachel's condition, and learns that she was given pills to suppress her violent side, but they were only effective for a short time. After a brief discussion, Teddy has an investigation session with other patients, where one of them writes a secret note in his diary. He asks her about Andrew Laddis, but she denies knowing anything about him. Chuck later asks Teddy about Andrew, because he was constantly trying to find some information about him. Teddy reveals he was the maintenance man at his apartment building, and was responsible for setting up the fire that killed Dolores. He further says that Andrew was mentally unstable, as he also set the school on fire, and claimed that voices in his head asked him to do it.
xQcL.
He was kept at the state prison, before being taken to Ashcliffe, but there is no record of him now. Both marshals go to the cemetery in search of Rachel, where Teddy shows him the note from the patient, asking them to run from the facility. As they are forced to take refuge inside an old building, due to a thunderstorm, Chuck asks if Teddy is here to kill Andrew, but he says he has already killed many people, and does not want to include another person on the list. Teddy remembers his operation for the liberation of concentration camps, where his team killed several German troops, who were responsible for multiple deaths. He also reveals he has been investigating Ashcliffe, which is believed to be a place where different psychological experiments are performed. He tells him about a guy named George Noyce, who had spent some time in the facility, and leaked the information to him. After listening to him, Chuck realizes it can be a trap, as he was given the same case he was already trying to get involved in. He also tells him that there is no way any patient can escape through such high security, and the entire Rachel incident seems to be pre-planned, to lure him to the island. They realize they are in serious trouble, but before they can figure out anything, McPherson arrives to pick them up.
Huh? Wait, real?
And takes them back to the building. They go to Kali's mansion to talk to him, where Teddy hears the discussion, and learns there are 66 patients in different wards. He believes Rachel pointed out to patient 67, who is yet to be disclosed. As Dr. Naring makes fun of his assumptions, Teddy tells him he is just trying to do his job, but gets surprised as Dr. John tells him that Rachel has been found. They are taken to her room for the investigation, but she has no clue about where she went. After meeting her, they come back to Kali's office, where Teddy has another migraine attack, and is forced to take the medicine. At night, his nightmares continue, when he sees his wife, as well as Rachel along with her deceased children. When he wakes up and spots a disturbance, Chuck tells him about a failure in the backup generator that made everyone furious. After learning that the electronic security systems have been compromised, they decide to take advantage of the situation, and sneak into Ward C for further investigation. Inside the ward, Teddy spots Andrew Laddis, and tries to talk to him, but he attacks him, while saying that he does not want to leave this place, because there is nothing for him in the outside world. In response to his attack, Teddy fights back, but is interrupted by the security guard and Chuck, who take Laddis with them. While looking around the place, he spots many dangerous criminals locked up in their cells. He also spots George Noyce, who holds him responsible for his imprisonment, but warns him about Chuck, while asking him not to believe anyone at this place. He also claims that there are some experiments going on in the lighthouse, and fears he might be another test subject. As he talks to him, Chuck arrives and urges him to go back to their ward, before anyone finds out about them. Upon his suggestion, they decide to go to the lighthouse, but realize they have taken the wrong route, and might have to go back to the main building. As they stand there thinking about the solution, Chuck tells him about finding an intake document about patient 67, but Teddy ignores it, thinking he is just trying to distract him. After arguing over whether they should go down or not, Teddy goes alone. He cannot make it there due to a high tide, and is forced to return, but there are no signs of Chuck anywhere. He then sees Chuck's body near the water, but realizes it was just an illusion of the rocks.
Wait, what?
Although he does not find Chuck, he spots a cave, where he comes across a woman, who is apparently the real Rachel Solando. She tells him she was one of the leading doctors before coming to the facility, and discovered experiments with psychotropic medication, and transorbital lobotomy, in an attempt to develop mind control techniques. Teddy questions her about her children, but she reveals it's just a story, and she has no kids. She reveals if they can succeed in reprogramming the mind, they can turn humans into emotionless creatures, who can aid in executing horrific crimes. She tells him he won't be able to leave the island, and asks if he had any tragedy in his life. When Teddy tells her about his wife's accident, Rachel suspects they will use the incident to prove him insane, so he can be kept at Ashcliff. Upon her question, Teddy confirms having nightmares and migraine attacks, to which she reveals they have been giving him drugs, through his food, drinks, medicine, and the cigarette, and he might start developing symptoms in the next few hours. He changes the subject, and asks about the lighthouse. Rachel confirms Dr. Colley and his colleagues have been doing brain surgeries there. After the discussion, she asks him to leave, as she cannot risk her location. He assures Rachel to take her out of this place, but she tells him it's impossible, because they control the ferries, and no one can leave without their consent. After coming back to the main area, he is picked up by a security guard, who is revealed to be the victim of these experiments, as he keeps talking in favor of the violence. Coming back, he asks Dr. Colley about Chuck, but he denies his presence, and tells Teddy came alone. The doctor then asks if he wants to leave this place, as Rachel has been found, so they can send him back by the next ferry.
Sure.
After satisfying him with his conversation, Teddy tries to escape, but learns they might have taken Chuck to the lighthouse, so he decides to go there in search of him. He runs into Dr. Naring, who attempts to stab him with a sedative-loaded syringe. Teddy overpowers him, stabbing him with the syringe and sedating him. He distracts the guards by setting Colley's car on fire, and sneaks out to get to the lighthouse, but gets shocked to see Dr. Colley already there. After inviting him to have a chat with him, Colley calls Dr. Sheehan, who is apparently back from his vacation. When Teddy confronts him about the drugs, while explaining his encounter with Solando, Colley denies her existence, and explains that his condition is due to withdrawal from chlorpromazine, which they have been giving him for the last 24 months. The doctor also reveals, the names Edward Daniel and Rachel Solando are the anagrams of Andrew Laadis and Dolores Chanel, while the girl appearing in his dreams is actually his daughter, Rachel. He tells him that Teddy is patient number 67, whose real name is Andrew Laadis, but he does not want anyone to know, and he had attacked George twice after he called him by this name. Soon, Dr. Sheehan arrives in the office, but Teddy gets shocked to see Chuck, who is revealed to be his primary doctor. Seeing his disbelief, Colley tells him they were playing along with his self-made story, because they wanted to take him out of his insanity. While listening to them, Teddy passes out, overwhelmed by the memories of what really happened. He wakes up in the ward, surrounded by Dr. Colley, Dr. Sheehan, and the rest of the staff. When questioned, he speaks in a coherent manner, to satisfy the doctors, saying he was serving his sentence for killing Dolores. Dr. Colley warns him this will be his last chance to accept their version of the truth, otherwise, they will have to lobotomize him. Some time later, Teddy relaxes on the hospital grounds with Dr. Sheehan, but calls him Chuck again, saying they must leave the island. Dr. Sheehan says he is still living in his story, and signals to Dr. Colley to tell him there is no improvement in his condition. And Teddy is taken away to be lobotomized. Before leaving peacefully, Teddy asks Chuck if it would be worse to live as a monster, or to die as a good man. As he starts walking away, Chuck calls him Teddy, but he does not respond, suggesting Teddy is voluntarily submitting to a lobotomy. The end. Thank you for watching.
No!
Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this. Turn on the notifications and leave a like to help the channel out.
No. I've seen it before.
Capped here. Today, I'm going to explain a crime film called Catch Me If You Can. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. A young man named Frank Abagnale Jr. lives a prosperous and stable life in New Rochelle, New Jersey, with his parents, Frank Sr. and his French mother, Paula. One evening, the New Rochelle Rotary Club offers Frank Sr. a token of achievement. Frank Jr. looks to his father with pride and admiration from the front seat. Back at home, Frank Sr. recounts how he met his wife Paula while Frank Jr. and his mother are dancing. His mother ends up spilling wine on the carpet, so Frank Jr. goes to the kitchen to get a towel. When he returns to the living room, he watches his parents lovingly dance to Ella Fitzgerald's Embraceable You. Early the next morning, Frank Sr. wakes his son abruptly and tells him not to go to school and come with him to a big meeting instead. The two drive up to a tailor to borrow a black suit, but the woman rejects them, saying that they don't open for half an hour and that they don't lend suits. In response, Frank Sr. produces a gold necklace from his pocket and asks the woman if it was hers. Moments later, Frank and his son drive up to Chase and Manhattan Bank with Frank Jr. donning the black suit. Frank tells him to wait in the car and asks him why the Yankees always win. To this, he tells him that people can't take their eyes off of the pinstripes, teaching Frank Jr. to value deviousness and misdirection. Frank Sr. then enters the bank to loan some money, but the teller refuses because Frank Sr. was being investigated for tax fraud. In the end, Frank Sr. fails to borrow money and trades their car instead. Later, the Abagnale family is forced to move out of their home because of their continued financial decline and Frank Sr.'s tax fraud issues. Despite this, Frank Sr. continues to do his best to do good for his son. Frank Sr. gave his son a checkbook on his 16th birthday and opened an account for him at a bank with $25 inside it.
They're poor.
Still knee-deep in their financial throes, Frank Jr. is forced to go to a public school. On his first day, he wears his private school uniform since he doesn't know what else to wear, and he's gotten used to wearing it. When he enters the school, the local bully greets him with a shove. Frank Jr. makes his way to his classroom, and one of the kids remarks that he looks like a substitute teacher. This gives him the impromptu idea to pose as a substitute teacher, so he starts ordering the kids.
At my school, we had a guy wear suits and he'd get bullied the fuck out. It was
To sit,
I
and
mean,
they comply. He then proceeds to teach the class and uses the opportunity to humiliate the bully who shoved him earlier, leaving the boy flustered and thinking that he had picked on an actual teacher. A few weeks pass by, and Frank Jr.'s parents were called on by the principal. He reports that Frank Jr. had been posing as a substitute teacher for weeks now, and he's even held a parent-teacher conference. His parents are surprised by this, but Frank's father secretly takes pride in his son's shenanigans. Back at home, Jr. is shocked to find his father's friend Jack leaving the bedroom with his mother. Frank Jr. is completely taken aback, and his mother, despite her discomfort, tries to keep him quiet with money. He then goes to his room and shuts the door. Some time passes by, and Frank Jr. comes home to yet another man in their house. Jr. lashes out, outraged, but the man calms him down and takes him to the room where his parents are waiting for him. The man is an attorney, and he tries to explain that Frank Jr.'s parents are getting a divorce. They hand him an official document, asking him to write the name of the parent he wants to go with for custody. Filled with emotion, the perplexed boy is unable to come to a decision, so he bolts out of the room and runs straight to the train terminal in a panic. For the next few months, Frank bounces back and forth between hotels and other odd places to get himself on his feet using the checkbook his father gave him. The checks were all fraudulent, however, since he didn't have any money whatsoever. One day, Frank, who is still a minor, tries to pass off as an older professional to get a loan. He learns how to tamper with documents and checks to get his way, but he gets rejected by every bank he goes to since he was still starting to learn. As Frank leaves another bank from a failed loan, a dignified pilot, together with several young and beautiful flight attendants, gets down from a cab. Frank is completely entranced by the fabulous display and the admiration surrounding the pilot. Inspired, Frank gets the idea to pose as a pilot himself. He pretends to be a high school student writing an article for the school paper and interviews a professional from the airport. Through this, he gathers all the needed information that he could use to impersonate a pilot. He then makes some phone calls to get into some of Pan Am Air's uniform suppliers. Through his connivances, he receives an official uniform and even creates fraudulent payroll checks that Pan Am Air employees could cash in. However, his constant lying one day bites him back when he is boarded on a plane as a deadhead, not knowing what it meant. Frank Jr. makes the acquaintance of the pilots and the flight attendants. Luckily for him, a deadhead is airline slang for a pilot tagging along on a free ride to be repositioned for an assignment and not someone responsible for manning a flight of his own. Over time, he's able to accumulate millions worth of forged checks using his slick charms and clever trickery. One afternoon, Frank meets with his father to surprise him with a Cadillac. While Frank Sr. is grateful, he refuses to use it because the IRS will think it's suspicious. He then becomes tearful as Frank Jr. brings up his mother. Still, Frank Sr. promises to continue fighting for her and to bring their family back together, which Frank Jr. wants more than anything else. Carl Hanratty, a no-nonsense and determined FBI agent, begins to track down Frank because of his check frauds. Carl manages to arrive at the hotel Frank is currently staying in. He springs into action and heads for Frank's room. Frank is on the way to his hotel room when he passes by Mr. Murphy, a blind old man aided by his companion on the way out the hallway. Frank greets Mr. Murphy and enters his hotel room. Carl arrives in Frank's room holding out a gun. He searches the room for Frank, who then appears from the bathroom. Despite his intrusion, Frank looks at Carl in a poised and calm manner before telling him that he is Agent Barry Allen from the Secret Service. While this lowers Carl's guard, he still demands identification from him. Just before Carl could open Frank's wallet, he directs him to the window, saying that his partner is apprehending the criminal already. Carl looks out and sees Mr. Murphy being assisted to his car by his companion. This convinces him, and he eases up, so Frank makes his leave while his wallet is still with Carl. The man slumps down on the bed and checks the wallet, only to find it devoid of any identification cards. When he looks out the window, Frank is already running. Frank has escaped and continues to learn more about aviation by continuing to pose as a student writing a paper. Eventually, the airline professional stops him and tells him to leave, but not before handing him a news article about a con artist posing as a pilot around airlines called the Skyway Man. In the article, he's called the James Bond of the sky. The remark inspires Frank to see the latest Bond flick, and he then buys the exact suit and car that James Bond wore in the movie. He goes to a hotel and meets a seductive woman with who he ends up spending the night. On Christmas Eve, Carl Hanratty sits alone at his desk in the office while everyone else is with their families. Carl suddenly receives a call on the phone and hears Frank's voice. He apologizes for fooling him before and tells Carl that he wants to meet in a hotel. But Carl calls it a bluff and disregards the whole thing. He proceeds to upset Frank by pointing out that the only reason he's calling him is that he has no one else to call.
Jesus.
Frank then hangs up, and Carl is left getting a kick out of it. The following day, Carl spends his morning in a diner. He also looks up Barry Allen in the phone book and sees several addresses of people listed under the name. A young waiter happens to see his papers and asks him if he's a fan of Barry Allen, with Barry Allen being the true identity of the fictional superhero The Flash. This is when Carl realizes that Frank is just a kid. With this new information in mind, he calls his partners to look up every missing child case to try and find Frank. Eventually, Carl and the FBI agents find Frank's mother, Paula. Paula, who now has remarried, cooperates with the FBI agents. She hands them a picture of her son from his yearbook, allowing Carl to identify Frank and get his name. Meanwhile, Frank is living it up as he started using his money to throw parties. At one such party, a friend of his gets into an accident, and he has to see him in the hospital. There, he meets a young nurse named Brenda Strong. The two of them build a connection and are immediately enamored by each other. Frank claims to Brenda that he is a doctor and he's looking for a job. It's unclear at first why he decided to impersonate a doctor, but later, in a letter to his father, he states that he's tired of running and wants to find someone to settle down with, hinting at his affection towards Brenda. Frank manages to con his way into becoming a doctor named Frank Connors with a supervisory position. In the hospital, Frank and Brenda's affection blossoms into a romance when the two of them share a kiss one day in Frank's office. However, the kiss is interrupted when Frank gets called into the ER. The staff there asks for advice on what to do with a young boy who had a bike accident. Despite his lack of any formal knowledge, he fakes his way out of the situation and gets away with it. Meanwhile, Carl Hanratty visits Frank Sr., and from their meeting, Carl immediately observes where Frank Jr. inherited his sly personality from. Frank Sr. is evasive with his answers whenever he's asked about Jr., but before Carl leaves, Frank Sr. tells him that he'll never give up his son. This is when Carl spots Frank Jr.'s letter splayed out on the table, and he takes note of the address. After some time, Frank expresses his genuine feelings for Brenda and even asks to marry her. They both agree to meet Brenda's parents over lunch. While they were there, Frank mentions that he's also a lawyer like Brenda's father. This is news to Brenda, and she excitedly tells her father to let Frank work for him in his law office. Later on, Brenda's father confronts Frank about who he really is. To this, Frank says, "I'm not a doctor, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not an airline pilot. I'm nothing really. I'm just a kid who's in love with your daughter." Luckily for him, Brenda's father misinterprets this as some metaphor and gives Frank his blessing. Frank eventually ends up passing the Louisiana board exam and begins his work with Brenda's father. There, he tries to learn what he can about law but gets yelled at by a judge when he mishandles some procedures. At the Strong residence, Frank is beginning to feel dejected when he watches Brenda and her family having a happy time together because he remembers his own family, which is now broken. Frank meets with his father in a bar and tells him eagerly that they'll get their family back. Frank Sr., who's now working in the post office, tells his son that his mother Paula has already remarried, upsetting Frank Jr. He tells his father that he wants to stop running, but his father encourages him to continue. With that, Frank Jr. leaves. It's Christmas Eve, and once again, Frank gives Carl a call. He tells him he wants a truce and he's getting married soon. Carl then says that he doesn't have a choice and that he needs to catch him because it's his job. Frank tells him that he just thought he should ask, then greets him Merry Christmas before hanging up. Carl has his new lead when he realizes that Frank won't be changing his last name this time since he's going to get married. It's not long before Carl finds his way into Frank and Brenda's wedding party. When Frank sees Carl coming, he retreats to his room, and Brenda follows after him. He finally tells her everything and then gives her instructions to meet him after 2 days at the airport. The couple bid each other a heartbreaking goodbye just after their very union. Carl steps into the room, but Frank is already gone. 2 days later, Frank is waiting for Brenda at the airport. He spots her in a pink top carrying her luggage. He is elated to see her but is quickly disappointed when he notices Brenda seeming to heed instructions from a concealed earpiece. Frank surveys the surroundings and anticipates the FBI, causing him to leave. Frank then hatches a plan to get to the airport again. He poses as a pilot once more and comes up with a fake internship program that he offers to 8 young women from a nearby school. Carl, who has about 100 men on airline security, watches out for Frank, but Frank only steps right into the door in his pilot outfit with his entourage of beautiful flight attendants to distract the attention of the all-male security officers. Frank eludes them once again and flies straight out of the country. 7 months later, the FBI grows weary of catching Frank, with the sole exception of Carl, who still has every intention of capturing him. Eventually, Carl realizes that the checks retrieved from Frank were all real checks. This leads him to ask some experts about what kind of machine could produce that kind of checks. The experts mention those machines exist in other countries as well. Carl then remembers their conversation with Paula, and he figures that Frank might be in his mother's village in France. Carl finally tracks down Frank in Montrichard. It's Christmas Eve, and a crowd of people gathers at the nearby chapel. He enters the check factory and finds Frank producing checks by the hundreds. A scared and exhausted Frank welcomes Carl like an old friend. At this point, Carl is concerned and protective, almost, so he tries to convince Frank to give up. He tells him that with the French police's anger and embarrassment, they are now planning to kill him. Frank finally lets Carl take him, but when they go outside, he is taken by the French police to their local prison. There, he almost dies 2 years later due to the poor conditions. Eventually, Carl finds a way to take Frank back home to the United States. While they're on the plane, Carl informs Frank that his father has died. Grief-stricken, Frank escapes from the plane through the bathroom stall. He hurriedly goes to where his mother and her new husband live. Despite all his staggering efforts, Frank only ends up getting the last bit of hope sucked out of him. He sees that his mother has moved on with her life, and she now has a young daughter. Devoid of both his father and any chance of bringing his family back, Frank loses the will to go on. Finally, he surrenders to Carl, who arrived with the FBI. He is then sentenced to 12 years in a maximum security prison.
That's it.
During his sentence, Carl visits Frank every now and again. During one such visit, he shows Frank a fraudulent check that he's working on. Frank instantly identifies that the teller is involved in the scheme. Impressed, Carl convinces the FBI to let Frank serve the rest of his sentence working for the FBI in the FBI bank fraud unit. Frank agrees to this and begins working with Carl, much to the hesitation of other FBI members. One day, while Frank is walking down the street, he finds a tailor shop with a pilot uniform displayed, reminding him of his former exploits. With the weekend coming in, the sorrow creeps to Frank as he's left with no friends or family to support him. This causes him to backslide into his old habits, and that weekend, he dons a pilot uniform to try and board a plane. Before he could, Carl intercepts him and tells him that no one's chasing him anymore. If he's planning to go, Carl won't stop him because he knows he'll be back. Monday comes, and Carl nervously waits on Frank with what decision he's made. To his relief, Frank soon comes back, and he helps Carl with the case. Finally, Frank has found himself a place to belong. Frank Abagnale Jr. has since then been married for 26 years and resides in the Midwest with his 3 sons. Frank has built a successful living as one of the world's leading experts on bank fraud and forgery, and he maintains a friendship with Carl Henratti. Subscribe to watch more videos like this.
Real story. Actually real. Wow. I'm feeling kind of strong.
And the
Welcome to
SEO
movie.
will catch up.
It's a great movie. I love this movie, chat. It's so good. Good Will Hunting.
Recaps. Today I will show you a drama, romance film from 1997 titled Good Will Hunting. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. Will Hunting is sitting in his house, reading a book. His close friend, Chucky Sullivan, drives to his place to pick him up. Will joins him, they get in the car and leave. At MIT, Professor Gerald assigns his students a theorem to solve by the end of the semester, adding that whoever solves it will have their accomplishment published in MIT newspaper. Will is a janitor at MIT. The given theorem is written on a board in the hallway. Will is quietly mopping the floor. After the students leave, he looks at the questions written on the board with wonder. Will and Chucky go to a bar. He is in a light mood. Despite that, Will decides to leave early. He goes home and works on the theorem he saw earlier that day.
Chat.
The next day,
Just a small remark, but chat, you know what's crazy? Is that back in days, if your shirt were like ripped and shit, this is what it would look like, right? And they made him wear this as like that's like a ripped shirt. He's poor. But these days, these people wear this as a high fashion. These exact ripped. It's
to
such
leave
so
early.
backwards,
He goes home
dude.
and works on the theorem he saw earlier that day. The next day, he carries out his cleaning duties while solving the theorem on the board in the hallway. Will and Chucky are playing baseball. Will keeps hitting Chucky, complaining that he's crowding the plate. Chucky mentions going to a Harvard bar the following week, and Will seems to agree. Gerald is attending an MIT alumni reunion. His students come and ask him about the person who solved the theorem. He is surprised to see the solution written on the board. He asks different students if they solved it, but no one seems to come forward. Will, Chucky, Morgan, and Billy are attending a baseball game. Will identifies one of the attendees as his childhood bully. They eventually leave to get food. While driving, they notice Will's bully misbehaving again. The group picks a fight with him and the cops show up and arrest Will. Gerald enters his class and notices an unusual number of students present. Everyone is curious about the person who solved the theorem. He asks for the mysterious person to reveal themselves, but no one speaks up.
Grafter is boring as
Afterwards,
fuck, I
Will
agree.
is solving a question on the board and Gerald spots him. He harshly tells him he can't graffiti over there. Will walks away quickly. Gerald later looks at the board and realizes Will is a genius. Will goes to the Harvard bar with his friends as planned.
It's Euler
Morgan
and
makes
Hamilton.
fun of him for getting fired from his job as a janitor. Chucky flirts with two Harvard students and lies about having a history class with one of them. A man named Clark shows up. He starts to bitterly insult Chucky by showing off his knowledge of history. He belittles him for having little knowledge of the subject. Will jumps into the conversation. He outsmarts Clark and calls him out for plagiarizing his remarks on history and being unoriginal. Clark is left feeling embarrassed. He tries to hurl insults back at Will, but he handles the situation well and Clark backs off. Later, Skylar, one of the girls Chucky was flirting with, comes and talks to Will. She shows her interest in him and gives him her number. They discuss going out sometime. Gerald visits the buildings and grounds office in search of Will. He is told that he didn't come to work today. They could contact his parole officer, since Will got his job through him. Will is in court, justifying himself for hitting a cop. The judge says he has a record of misconduct. He also mentions Will living in different foster homes. He got removed from 3 of them due to severe physical abuse. His charges are not dismissed and his bail money is set to $50,000. Afterwards, he calls Skylar from jail and checks up on her, asking if they could hang out soon. He is taken to meet Gerald, who offers to help him out on 2 conditions. Firstly, he will agree to work more on math, and secondly, he will see a therapist. Will takes the therapist part rather lightly. Will works on math with Gerald and they seemingly have a good time. He visits different therapists and struggles to open up. He keeps taking them lightly and mocking them. He doesn't listen to anybody. At last, Gerald decides to make Will meet with.
This shit is so funny.
He doesn't listen to anybody. At last, Gerald decides to make Will meet with Dr. Sean McGuire, his roommate from college who is a therapist now. Gerald goes to meet Sean at work. They talk about how they haven't seen each other since Sean's wife passed away. Meanwhile, Will tells Chucky about his probation and counseling arrangement. Gerald convinces Sean to counsel Will, as he's exceptionally intelligent and worth a shot. He also mentions how they're both from South Boston. Will meets with Sean and he behaves casually. They discuss books and exercising. He's very conceited. He starts talking about a painting in Sean's office. He mocks his painting and ends up making assumptions and saying derogatory comments about Sean's wife, to which he reacts very seriously, reminding Will of where the boundaries lie. After Will leaves, Gerald genuinely tells Sean that he understands if he doesn't want to see Will again, but Sean is ready to see him again next week. Sean stays up during the night, lost in his thoughts. Will and Skylar spend time together. She mentions her education and elite background and about going to Stanford to study medicine after graduating. They enjoy each other's company and have a good time. Will meets Sean according to schedule, and Sean takes him outside to visit the lake. He tells him he thought about his remarks on his painting, due to which he stayed up at night and came to realize that Will is only a kid and he doesn't know what he's talking about. He knows Will has never been out of Boston. If Sean asked him about art, he could talk a lot about artistic literature, but he could not explain what it actually smelled like in the Sistine Chapel or how beautiful its ceiling was in person. If he asked him about women, he could talk plenty, but could never know what it was like to feel truly content in someone's presence. If he was asked about war, he wouldn't know the first thing about experiencing one. He doesn't know real love or loss because hasn't experienced any of it. While talking, Sean mentions his wife dying due to cancer. He doesn't perceive Will to be a confident man, he is just a scared kid trying to act tough. He presumed everything about Sean's life by looking at a painting. He knows Will is an orphan himself and went through tough times, so can his life be understood by reading Oliver Twist? He can only understand him if he's willing to open up and talk about his experiences, but he sees that Will is too scared to open up. Sean leaves and everything slowly sinks in for Will. That evening Will calls Skylar from a payphone while it rains heavily. She picks up but he doesn't say anything and ends the call. Will meets with Sean for their therapy session. He remains quiet throughout and leaves when the time is over. Sean realizes he won't talk unless he wants to. Sometime later, Will is working on solving mathematical problems and outsmarts a polished and learned man with his answers. Gerald is impressed. Will finally starts talking to Sean, when he first cracks a joke. He proudly talks about how he went on a date, and didn't care to really check in with Skylar again. Sean calls him an amateur. Will insists that he knows what he's doing, saying she's different from other women he has been with. Sean says he should call her, but he says he doesn't want to ruin what he has at present by getting to know her more because then their relationship will become dull and boring. Sean mocks him for his approach by saying that due to his behavior, he will get through life never really knowing anyone, and mentions his own wife's little habits that only he knew about. They laugh together. He says these trivial memories are what truly matter and people choose who they let into their worlds. He reminds Will he isn't perfect, neither is Skylar. They just have to figure out if they are perfect for each other, and the only way to find out is by giving it a shot. Will asks if he has ever thought about getting remarried, but he shows his loyalty to his dead wife. Will uses Sean's own statement against him, saying that he will get through life never really knowing anyone. Will goes to visit Skylar and apologizes for ghosting her. He asks if they can go out again. Skylar says she is busy with university work, she has to assign the proton spectrum to Ibigammon. Will leaves and quickly returns with the answer to her assignment, saying he couldn't wait till later to spend time with her. They attend a dog race together, in which Skylar's dog takes part too. Her dog wins. She comes to know that Will grew up in South Boston and asks about his experiences growing up over there and about his siblings. He says he has 12 big brothers and Skylar expresses her wish to meet them. Will asks Sean if he regrets meeting his wife and he denies it, saying there are pros and cons to everything. Will asks when did he know she was the one for him, and he quotes a date, showing how well he remembers everything. They met at a baseball game. Sean mentions the highlights of the game but later says he wasn't even there to watch the whole game because he was spending time with his future wife. Will mocks him for missing out on such an important event. He expresses no regrets for the time he spent with his wife, throughout his life. Will and Skylar spend time together and share intimacy. She asks him when he will show her his place and let her meet with his friends and brothers. He says he will take her to meet them. Chucky, Billy, and Morgan meet up with Will and Skylar. They tell each other funny stories and converse, but Will still seems reluctant to show Skylar his personal life. Chucky taunts him humorously, saying that if she saw his living conditions, he'd get dropped like a bad habit. Will manages to persuade him to give him his car keys. Gerald meets Sean to talk about Will. He says he should talk to him about his future, as he has been getting lots of job offers that fit Will's potential. Sean doesn't think Will is ready yet. The conversation gets heated as a conflict arises. Sean wants Will to figure out what he wants to do in life on his own, and Gerald wants him to pursue mathematics. He says he sent Will to attend a job meeting. Will sends Chucky to the job meeting instead of him. Chucky behaves casually and leaves the people of the company confused. Skylar asks Will if he has a photographic memory, considering his intelligence and how something as difficult as organic chemistry is so easy for him, despite studying it only for fun. He explains how he is just naturally good at studies. They get affectionate with each other. Later, Skylar expresses her wish for Will to come with her to California. It gets serious, when Will clearly shows his fear of abandonment. He fights with her, angrily telling her about his traumatic past. He lied about having brothers,
xQcL.
He's an abused orphan. Skylar tells him she loves him, but he says he doesn't love her, shattering her. Tom makes Will aware of how he should be appreciative of Gerald for working so hard with him. The situation gets tense when Gerald asks him about the job meeting. Will says he had a date and sent Chucky instead. Gerald isn't pleased to hear this. Will says he doesn't want to spend his life explaining stuff to people. Gerald says he could show some appreciation. Will brags about how easy the proof is for him, while Gerald struggles to solve it. He burns the proof as Gerald miserably admits Will has more potential than him. He is sad that he just throws it all away. Will goes to a job meeting for the National Security Agency and explains why he wouldn't work for them with a very witty and detailed explanation. Sean asks Will if he has a soulmate and he denies having one. During their discussion, Will gets defensive about how low-paying jobs aren't considered honorable. Sean understands there is honor in them. He tries to dig deeper by asking Will what he actually wants to do with his life, but Will just gets impractical again, and this time Sean simply asks him to leave because he won't tolerate his foolishness. Will and Skylar have a bittersweet phone call. He calls to check in before she leaves. She tells him she loves him, but he doesn't say anything. He sits on a bench alone, while Skylar boards her flight for California. Gerald is frustrated about Will not showing up for his session with Sean. Will and Chucky are at the construction site. He makes Will realize how he's throwing away all his potential and being ungrateful for the intellect he has been blessed with. Sean and Gerald have a fierce argument over Will, with Sean defending him by saying he has suffered from the fear of abandonment his entire life. He is emotionally scarred. Gerald only wants him to pursue mathematics and Sean gets pissed off. They angrily yell and resent each other for their respective faults in the past. Will walks in and Gerald leaves. Sean mentions sending his file to the judge for evaluation. They talk about their experiences with physical abuse. He tells him he broke up with Skylar. Sean makes Will realize that none of what happened to him was his fault. He breaks down and hugs Sean while crying badly. Will rides the bus alone and spends time thinking. Sean and Will meet for their final session. Will mentions his new job, which he got through an opportunity provided by Gerald. Sean gives him his number and they hug. Will turns 21 and his friends show him the car they built for him. They are happy together. Gerald visits Sean. They both apologize to each other and get past their grudges. Will drives to Sean's place and leaves a note. Chucky and the guys visit Will's place to pick him up and find him gone. Chucky is happy that he finally stepped out of his comfort zone. Sean reads the note and finds out Will ditched the job and went to see Skylar. It makes him happy. Will starts his life-affirming drive to California to start over with Skylar and take a leap into an unpredictable future. The end. Thank you for watching. Subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this.
Son of a bitch stole my line. Yeah, it's a classic, dude.
Welcome back to Movie Recaps. Today I will show you a crime, drama, mystery film from 2017, titled Other Life. Spoilers ahead. Watch out and take care. Music like a heartbeat can be heard, along with a close-up image of a woman.
Virtual prison where 1 year equals 1 minute of lifetime.
Woman's blue eye. Blackness creeps inwards towards the center, then disappears. A kaleidoscopic blue and green image settles into that of a bridge on the ocean. Ren Amari and Jared Amari sit on the beach in black wetsuits. Ren asks Jared if he wants to go back into the water. He declines and asks if she is going to stay there forever, but gives in after Ren tempts him with the goggles and flippers. They both swim through the clear water. Another kaleidoscopic image settles into a view from a building window. Ren opens her eyes with a stream of black fluid dripping from her right eye. She is sitting on the floor, surrounded by empty plastic eyedroppers. A countdown clock shows that Other Life will go live in a little over 6 days. Voiceover begins from Ren sitting in an interview with the TDA, a drug administration. An interviewer comments on her exceptional academic record, which ended 4 years ago. Ren responds that it was due to an accident where her brother nearly drowned. The interviewer offers her condolences, but Ren clarifies that her brother had survived the incident. They discuss Other Life as a difficult to classify technology. Ren describes it not as a drug, but as a biological software that allows one to program new memories, indistinguishable from reality on a chemical level. Ren visits her brother in the hospital. He is in a coma. She sets up a laptop and headband device to read his brain waves before she uses another eyedropper to drip the black fluid into his eye. Then, Ren is on the train, where she declines a call from her dad, Robert, before arriving at a busy workspace. A coworker, Byron, tells her to clear the approvals in her queue. Back in her other life, Ren jumps out of a plane and parachutes to the ground before she wakes up in a testing room with Byron. A cut back to the interview reveals that Ren's father has been vocal about the potential dangers of prolonged exposure to her technology. He fears physical symptoms could include seizures and brain death. Ren confirms that there are risks, as abuse of any substance could be risky. Ren describes her technology in a voiceover as she tests a hiking experience. She describes it as a script that the brain follows like it would any other memory, using pieces of the subconscious to create a perfect day. But, she also says that there is no chance of it lasting any longer than that. Ren tests a snowboarding experience in which she climbs a snowy mountain before snowboarding down. But the experience repeats, returning her to the cabin at the beginning of the day. She finds herself stuck as the setting warps and changes around her until Byron manages to get her out. By the time he does that, she had already gone through 6 days inside the experience. She insists she can fix the code and that they can still use it, because the snowboarding experience was going to be a big seller. At a sales meeting, Sam, the co-founder of Other Life alongside Ren, presents the idea of Other Life to potential buyers. He talks about it as buyable free time in which one can experience full adventures before work or on their lunch break. Sam explains how Other Life was more than a simulation and could add years' worth of experiences to someone's life.
No! Was there TOS? Toes? No fucking shot there was actual toes. Okay, go on.
He finishes the presentation by asking the clients what they would like to do with their other life. When Ren arrives, Sam introduces her as his co-founder and asks her to explain some of the science behind the technology. After the meeting, Sam and Ren disagree about what the company needs going forward. On her way out of the meeting, Ren encounters Danny, who was waiting for a date she had forgotten about. She apologizes, but says she has to work. Back at the interview, the interviewers read out loud from reports about how users can end up dissociating from reality. They state how such an experience could seem isolating. Ren and Byron work late that night to debug the snowboarding experience. The countdown clock shows Other Life will go live in about 5 days. Ren finds the error in the code and tests the new version without issues. They continue to work late, and Byron asks about the number of tests Ren has done. She tells him 482, which he compares to living about 20 days in Other Life during one real day. Danny comes in to deliver a report Sam had asked for on the long-term use of Other Life. Ren reveals she did not know about it as she reads it. She also asks Byron not to go to Sam behind her back. Byron thinks that the recursive glitch that they've been getting could be the key to longer simulations. He and Danny decide to go out for drinks, but Ren stays behind to keep working. She runs the swimming simulation with her brother again, and is again surrounded by the empty droppers from her tests. She records the result of her 340th test and states that it still needs more testing. The interviewers discuss medical applications of Other Life for brain and memory disorders, along with the potential moral issues considering that it puts ideas into people's heads. Ren insists she has no other applications in mind. Ren returns to her brother's bedside to try Other Life on him again. His eye twitches and she feels hopeful. When a nurse comes over, she hides her tech and asks him about it. The nurse reveals that things like eye twitches do happen sometimes. She leaves, goes home, and looks over the data. Byron and Andy call her about what she's missing during their night out, and she gets an email from her father about withdrawing her brother's life support. The next day, Ren visits her dad at the college campus where he teaches. They discuss Other Life, its morality, progress, and how it could help her brother. Her dad is worried about a glitch, but she continues to insist that it's just bad code. He insists that depression, anxiety, and other mental conditions could also just be bad code, except the brain is more complicated than that. Ren accuses him of giving up on her brother and claims that if he's conscious in there that he just needs a way to get out. Her dad states that he could unplug her brother without her consent and is merely asking for her support. Ren goes to work, angry. She asks another coworker named Cass for help with taking her files out of the system. Sam and Byron notice that the amount of nanite stock they've been going through is much higher than her reported tests. They ask what simulation she's using, but she won't tell them, just saying it is still experimental. Byron leaves and she talks with Sam alone. He proposes the idea of using Other Life as a prison, to rehabilitate people and allow them to live out their sentences in minutes. But, Ren refuses and Sam gets angry. shouting at her to get back to work on the actual product. She leaves and runs into Danny outside. He tries to find out what's wrong, but she doesn't want to talk about it. Instead, they both leave and
oh my god! What the fuck? What the fuck, dude?
About how everything, including memory, is a chemical. Danny talks about how he did not expect the experience to feel so real. Then, as Ren checks her phone, Danny grabs another dropper from her purse and tries it, thinking that it was another of the same snowboarding experience. Instead, he gets one of Ren's experimental ones where she swims with her brother. He starts having seizures and won't wake up, so Ren calls an ambulance. The countdown clock is a little under 5 days from release. Ren and Sam talk with legal counsel. She corrects them when they call Otherlife a drug and explains that it is actually a software. Sam decides to talk to Ren alone and questions her about the experience that killed Danny. Every other experience had been tested and approved repeatedly, but only Ren had tested that one. In a cut to the interview, the interviewer asks Ren what her ambition for the technology is, but she doesn't answer. In order to handle the situation without sending Ren to jail, Sam arranges for a deal where rather than having charges pressed against them, Ren would agree to be a trial patient to a 1-year confinement in Otherlife. Sam pressures her to do it, to keep the company alive, but she doesn't want to. She realizes that Sam had still been planning to use the confinement application of the tech behind her back. Sam insists that a minute of her life is better than the alternative, considering she killed someone with an untested sample. She agrees. Ren, Sam, Byron, and several officials go to the testing room. The 365-day trial is much longer than the usual 24-hour simulation, so Ren nervously questions Byron to make sure that everything has been checked over. Once Byron puts her under, she finds herself in a small room where one wall is a screen with the large numbers 001. She can hear the electronic buzzing from the digital number. The room has a sleeping mat, a toilet, a tablet and pen, and a hatch for food, water, and toiletries. She exercises, eats, and keeps notes on her tablet about how to improve the space, only to remember that no one else would be able to read those notes. When the cell resets for the day, the light turns red and the number changes to show 002. She remembers Danny seizing and bangs her head on the wall. Ren hums and reaches her fingers between the grate on the floor to distract herself on the 3rd day. On the 5th day she remembers swimming with her brother, and she remembers losing him and seeing him wash up on the beach. She promises her brother she won't forget him. She starts taking notes of people who woke from long-term comas and triggered those recoveries as the days go by. She argues with herself about whether or not her brother is truly gone, and whether she can actually return life with programming. Day 365 arrives, and she waits as the lights turn red. But, then the room resets to 001. Ren panics, and realizes that the exit routine did not work. She shouts, and starts breaking things. Eventually, she lays still in the damaged room, but hears wind whistling. She opens the hatch and finds a gap which she pushes at. Through the gap she finds and rips at a plastic sheet and climbs through into a warehouse-like room containing her plastic sheeting-covered cell. She finds stores of the food and water she'd been consuming, a monitor room, and a guard's desk. The guard returns to his desk and sees her, so she grabs the keys and a coat to run from him, stealing a truck to get away. Ren ends up walking along a busy road, finding ads for Otherlife and seeing people everywhere. Ren calls the hospital to ask about her brother, and returns to her workplace to find it empty. She buys some new clothes, and sees a magazine cover with Sam's face. She goes to the police and they find that there was a missing persons report filed for her, but that she was also listed as having residency in Italy for the past year. She tries to tell them about what happened with Otherlife, including the fact that she was the co-founder. But, the police don't find any evidence of any charges filed against her. When they go to check out the cell they find nothing but remnants. She checks her apartment, but someone else has been living there for the past year and the attendant at the front desk won't let her check for her stuff. Meanwhile, Sam arrives, promising that he had come as soon as he'd heard and wanted to get her somewhere safe. The attendant at the front desk does not let Sam into the building and Ren tries to avoid him. She eventually manages to sneak out without Sam seeing her. Ren goes to find Cass for help, who lets her in and gives her something to eat. Cass reveals that the other workers thought that Ren had cashed out and left to go to Italy without saying goodbye. Ren also finds out that Danny didn't die, and sees him again. Ren, Cass, and Danny gather at a restaurant where Danny talks about his experience in the swimming simulation, where he felt like he was drowning. He woke up in the hospital but was fine after a week of testing. The launch of Otherlife also went well, confinement being a backbone of the company with proposals for some sentences to last decades or even centuries. Ren decides that she wants to get to the bottom of what happened. Danny tries to encourage her to run or tell the media. Ren reveals that she registered her dad's patent, which he refused to use, with hope of helping her brother. But, that patent had now been stolen by Sam. Using Cass's ID badge, Ren and Danny sneak into the Other Life building to look for Ren's data. They find Byron's office and Danny holds him back so Ren can use his terminal. She finds her hard drive and takes it back, but Byron manages to alert the authorities, so Ren punches him and they both leave. Danny and Ren manage to escape, but Cass is captured by the authorities. Ren explains that they will need an Other Life printer while they drive away, but since the Other Life building has most of them, they leave the city to get to the one at Robert's house. When they arrive, they find the house empty, so Ren gets to work. She wakes up the next morning at the desk, and she and Danny take a moment to take in the location as they have breakfast. Ren apologizes to him, he forgives her, and they make love. The image of her eye from the beginning of the movie appears, and she wakes to the sound of her dad coming home.
Hey! What is your problem, man? Where were we at?
Gap, which the media at the desk, and she was to create multiple branches to talk to him and tells her dad about how Sam stole her work. She also realizes that her dad was the one who filed the missing persons report. Returning to the printer, Ren explains her swimming simulation. She says that when Danny took it, it gave him the experience of being underwater and he drowned, subconsciously choosing that option for how the simulation would go. Ren's intent when designing the experience was to create multiple branches to give Jared a choice, and an option where he could get out alive and thus wake up. Her version of Other Life was one with the option to rewrite memories, which was dangerous and drug-like. She also expressed worry that the company would eventually refine it to that same point. Robert says he'll call the TDA to raise a safety challenge, which will tie Sam up for a while in a review and give them time to finish it. But Ren prints the experience and insists that it will work when her dad asks if she had already finished it. She goes to the hospital to give it to her brother. After a few moments, he wakes up and Ren is happy, but then he begins to seize uncontrollably. Ren hesitates, crying, then finally pulls the plug. She stays by his side at the hospital into the night until Sam approaches her. He describes seeing how Jared had made a decision to live in a dream world rather than wake up. Ren starts seeing flashes of the testing room, of people shouting and confused, and of Byron telling her to wake up. The hospital disappears and she returns to the beach yet again, alone, and realizes that she's still in her other life. She walks into the water and lets the waves crash over her. The water shifts to kaleidoscope imagery with distorted voices, eventually turning red. Ren wakes up in the testing room, and punches Sam before trying to destroy the recording. She eventually calms down and sits with T as she thinks about her brother, and her interactions with her dad and Danny while in the experience. She answers the ambition question in the interview that she wants to give people a special chance at a kind of life they might not know otherwise. The interviewers approve the programming for public consumption. Sam and Ren talk where she apologizes for punching him and tells him she wants to withdraw from the company to focus on research and development. She would leave the company with Sam but would keep the patent. This angers Sam, and he throws something from his desk once she leaves. Ren attends Danny's funeral where he is cremated, and talks to her dad about Sam. She asks him to come with her to the hospital. Before Ren can get to the hospital, she receives a call from Sam. He tells her that she needs to see something in person, so she goes back to the office and is greeted by things being put away. She finds Sam and Byron reviewing her experience. They realize that she had managed to break out of the prison, and get excited about it as a potential interactive experience. But Ren refuses to help and tries to leave. Sam convinces her to sit down as he explains why she should help, but then he tries to force her back into the same experience. At first, Byron refuses to help until Sam tells him that the sooner he helps, the sooner Ren can get back to them, so Byron sets up the experience. Ren finds herself back in the prison, where she starts thinking her way through the days and she manages to wake up on her own. When she gets up, she wipes the fluid from her cheek and forces Sam into the same experience. Her and Byron watch as Sam goes through the days until the system crashes and they realize that they will have to wake him up or he could die. But Ren waits to do so until he has gone through all 365 plus 1 days like she had. Sam wakes up, and Ren and Byron leave him to sob in the chair. Later, Ren meets with her father at the hospital and they mourn Jared's death.
What?
Ren returns to the bridge at the beach and watches the ocean. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can watch more videos like
What?
this. Thanks for watching.
Guys, I still think that this whole scheme of making movies really quick, okay, can be optimized better. I think recaps don't give the whys enough, but too much of the what. So too much whats, not enough whys. Or sometimes the whys are much more important than the whats. And I wish sometimes they gonna sped run the what's and giving a little bit of what the why. Yeah, you know what I'm saying. Did not get it? Sometimes they say,
Welcome back.
sometimes they say like, you know, guys, you know in a movie, like sometimes, let's say the father's statue means that the family's heritage is in it and has all the backstory, right? And if there's a big million, 8 scenes about the fucking talisman, and the recap it says, the dad gives the son a weird thing, and they move on. And you're like, dude, what? So you end up not really knowing what's the importance of the object. But you're like, and then you're like, why the fuck is even a statue? This is so pointless.
If you,
and you don't really get it.
What you need to watch minute movies.
You know what I'm saying?
Hey everyone, welcome back to Movie Recap. Today I'm gonna show.
Dude, she's doing naked. Are you good, man? Who is linking this shit? Okay, listen to me very carefully, okay? I'm gonna send a message to Sammy. Okay, watch this. Then I'll do a little bit of Gamba because I want to. And when I'm done, maybe I'll do a little bit of Valorant and then we'll go to bed. Or none and only Valorant. Or I don't know yet.
Show you a movie called Lucy. It is a 2014 French science fiction action film written and directed by Luc Besson and produced by Virginie Besson-Silla. The movie is about a woman accidentally caught in a dark deal, turns the tables on her captors, and transforms into a merciless warrior evolved beyond human logic. Let's start.
Oh my god! Oh my god, what the fuck?
Then we in the opening shot, we see a cell split up into multiple other cells. Then we see a proto-human in prehistoric times drinking from a lake. Lucy narrates by saying that life began billions of years ago and ponders just what we have done with it since then. In the present, Lucy is a young American woman outside a hotel in Taiwan with her week-long boyfriend Richard. He is asking her to take a briefcase up to the room of a Mr. Zhang. Even though offered $500, she refuses to do anything for Richard without knowing what it is that he wants her to deliver, so he handcuffs Lucy's wrist to the handle of the briefcase, leaving her with no choice. She enters the lobby and tells the clerk that Richard is sending her up to Zhang, and then nervously gives her name to the clerk. Lucy looks out the window to see Richard smiling and trying to be encouraging until he is shot and killed. A group of thugs come out of the elevator and force Lucy to go up with them. This scene is juxtaposed with footage of a cheetah chasing a gazelle, mauling it and then carrying the gazelle's corpse in its teeth. They take Lucy to Zhang's apartment. There are bloodied corpses on the floor, causing Lucy to vomit. Zhang comes out with his hands soaked in blood. He rings up a man on the phone to translate for Lucy. She cries, not knowing what is going on or why any of this is happening. Zhang writes down number 140 on a piece of paper, which is the code to open the briefcase. Zhang steps into the next room while his men arm themselves with guns and shields. Lucy opens the briefcase, which contains 4 1kg bags of blue powdered crystals. Zhang brings in a drugged-up man to snort some of the blue powder. The man briefly convulses and then starts laughing maniacally until Zhang shoots him in the head. Lucy is then ordered to do a job, which she refuses to do until she gets smacked. Lucy wakes up in a hotel room. There is a bandage on her stomach. Zhang's men come in and throw her some clothes. She is taken to Zhang, along with 3 other men. A British man known as the Limey comes in to explain to Lucy that she and the other men have had a drug called CPH4 stuffed into their lower intestines. The drug is supposed to be the next big thing on the market, and they intend to smuggle it across the world. Afterwards, Lucy is taken to a room and chained up, where one of the thugs tries to get into her jeans, then starts kicking her in the stomach, right where they cut into her. This causes a tear in the drug bag, leaking the powder into Lucy's system. She begins to writhe and thrash all across the room, even reaching up to the ceiling until she falls back down to the floor. As all of this happens, we meet Professor Samuel Norman giving a lecture to a classroom on his research of the brain's capacity. He essentially explains what could happen if humans could exceed beyond the suggested 10% brain capacity that they use, as well as its responses to certain environments that would allow the brain to submit to immortality or reproduction. Basically, if the subject doesn't like their environment, they would choose immortality and move elsewhere, but if they were happy with their setting, they would be inclined to reproduce. If, say, humans could reach up to 40%, they could manipulate matter. One student asks Norman what would happen if humans reached 100%. He says he has no idea. Lucy reawakens, with her eyes glowing bright blue. She sits upright, calmer than before. A thug comes into the room, and Lucy spreads her legs to tempt him. The thug smiles and lays down his gun on the table. As he walks over to her, Lucy grabs his belt and flips him over, then pulls the table over to take the gun. After she frees herself, she shoots the other thugs as they're eating.
Okay, dude.
She gets shot in the shoulder, but is able to dig the bullet out without feeling pain. She then eats all the thugs' food before leaving. She finds 2 taxi drivers outside, shoots one in the leg, and gets one of them to take her to the hospital. On her way to the hospital, Lucy has heightened senses and is able to hear people's voices from outside the car. When she gets to the hospital, she is able to clearly read the signs, as if they were in English to her. She gets to an operating room, where doctors are working on a man. Lucy looks at the patient's X-ray scans and then shoots the man, stating to the doctors that they wouldn't have been able to save him because the tumor in his brain had already spread far enough. She forces the doctors to take the bag out of her stomach. She then calls her mother to tell her that she feels everything, the air, the blood in her veins, the heat leaving her body, and is even able to access the deepest parts of her memories, like when she was sick as a child, or even petting a cat when she was barely a year old. She tells her mother that she loves her before hanging up. The doctor pulls the bag of drugs out of Lucy's stomach, and after she tells him that it's CPH4, he tells her that this is something that pregnant women produce 6 weeks into their pregnancy as nutrients for the fetus, and that the doctor is surprised Lucy has survived this long with it in her body. Lucy makes one more stop back to the hotel to find Jang as he is in the middle of getting a tattoo and a facial. She kills his guards and then shoos the tattoo artist away before sticking knives in both of Jang's hands. With her newfound powers, she does a Vulcan mind meld into his brain and sees where the other 3 drug mules are going based on images of their plane tickets. She leaves, and Jang lets out a pained scream. Lucy goes to the apartment of her friend Carolyn to use her laptop. She reads all of Norman's research in a matter of seconds, then contacts him to tell him what she's read. He is astonished to hear that she read everything, even as she continues to explain what she is feeling and experiencing now that she has reached up to 20% brain capacity. She is able to manipulate electronics, making her appearance on the TV in Norman's hotel room, as well as his phone and the radio. She plans to meet with him in 12 hours. Before leaving, she prints out a prescription for Carolyn, telling her that her liver and kidneys are failing and that she needs to make new lifestyle choices, and she'll be okay.
What?
The news about Lucy shooting the patient has spread, so as she makes her way through the airport, she changes her hair color and style. She calls a French policeman, Captain Pierre Del Rio, to inform him of the other drug mules. She then boards the plane and continues her research on the brain, typing on her laptop at rapid-fire pace. The flight attendants ask her to turn off her computer, and Lucy asks for a glass of champagne, while also telling one flight attendant to wipe her nose without looking, and the lady's nose bleeds after. Lucy is given the champagne glass and toasts to knowledge. She sips, and then 40% flashes on screen. She discovers a tooth in her glass, and then she spits up 3 more teeth. Then her skin starts to disintegrate, in plain sight of the passengers and flight attendants. Lucy runs to the bathroom, where her fingers start to disappear, and her face begins to sort of melt. She pulls out the rest of the CPH4 and snorts it, restoring herself to normal, but she passes out. Lucy wakes up in a hospital room with Del Rio and a few other officers and doctors waiting, right after they have apprehended the other mules. She sits up instantly, to the alarm of a nurse. Lucy leaves the room and is surrounded by armed men. With a wave of her fingers, she is able to put them all to sleep, except for Del Rio. Lucy uses her powers to find a new location, taking over Del Rio's car and driving manically through the streets, admitting she's never driven before. Meanwhile, one of Zhang's henchmen, Jai, comes in with more armed men to find the other mules. They take them into a room and cut the drugs out of them after killing them. Together, they find Zhang's men, and, with her brain function now at 60%, she moves them around the hall and prevents Jai from escaping with the briefcase full of drugs by creating a sort of invisible wall. She swipes the drugs from Jai and starts to leave, but orders Del Rio to go with her. He thinks he is of no use to her, but she walks over to him and kisses him, asking him to come as a reminder.
Oh my god, Jesus.
Lucy and Del Rio find Norman and his colleagues in a university, where she begins to divulge all she has come to realize with her brain power now exceeding that of a normal human being. While this happens, Zhang and his men infiltrate the place and start shooting. Lucy gives the rest of the CPH4 to the professors for them to synthesize into a liquid material that goes into her bloodstream. Her brain function goes to 70%, and her hands start to turn into a black wormy sort of goo that attaches itself to the computers in the room, giving Lucy more energy from matter and thereby supplying her with an insane amount of power.
What?
As her brain function continues to increase, she manipulates matter in such a way that she seems to erase everything in the room, leaving the professors standing in white space before creating some kind of new age supercomputer before their eyes. From outside, as Zhang's men are shot down by the police, he orders Jai to do something. Jai takes a rocket launcher and blasts through the room, sending Lucy thousands of miles to Times Square. She manages to move time with a wave of her hand. She travels backwards from early 20th century New York to colonial times, even all the way to prehistoric times, to come face to face with the proto-human from the opening scene. They touch fingers, sending Lucy through the cosmos and all of space and time, giving her unlimited and infinite power. Zhang enters the room and slowly raises his gun to Lucy's head. And then she reaches 100%. Her body disappears, leaving her clothes behind. Zhang fires his gun at nothing. Del Rio comes in and shoots Zhang to death. The black matter in the room disappears and morphs into a flash drive that lands in Norman's hands, thus expanding and completing his research. Del Rio asks where Lucy is. A message appears on his phone saying, "I am everywhere." The film concludes with an overhead shot of Zhang's corpse, while Lucy's voice says this is what can be done with life. Thanks for watching.
Wait, she becomes
See
God?
you in another movie recap. Please like and subscribe, and click the bell icon to get new video
I'm
updates.
still at work.
Have a nice
Thank you
day.
for keeping me company.
Because I think I think this movie is just kind of garbage.